Was the Roman Empire truly doomed the moment Attila's arrows stopped flying? Did a single, terrifyingly charismatic barbarian hold the fate of an entire civilization in his brutal grip? And could a teenage emperor utterly detached from the messy realities of power actually cause the downfall of a world? Let's rewind. Imagine a landscape painted in ochre and blood, stretching across the vast plains of Eastern Europe. It's the 440s and the air vibrates with the thunder of hooves, the clang of steel, and the chilling pronouncements of Attila the Hun. This wasn't some grand, heroic narrative of conquest. This was a slow, agonizing bleed. The Eastern Roman Empire, the one clinging desperately to life near Constantinople, was being systematically, relentlessly hammered. Armies crumbled, treasures vanished. And the emperor, a perpetually bewildered young man named Valentinian, he was mostly just existing. He'd arrived in Italy as a 6-year-old, a pawn in a Byzantine power play. His mother, Honoria, a woman with ambitions that far outweighed her good sense, had orchestrated his coronation, dreaming of a unified Roman world. But Honoria's dreams quickly turned to dust. She'd fallen for Attila, a whirlwind of savage beauty and terrifying power, and their affair had produced a scandal that threatened to unravel everything. Then her plans went even further off course when Attila himself, in a move that still baffles historians, decided to marry her. It was a stunning, almost unbelievable spectacle. The Hunnic king, the Roman princess, united by a bizarre, politically motivated alliance. But Attila wasn't interested in a lasting marriage. He was interested in gold, in land, in the utter destruction of anything that stood in his way. And he wasn't alone. The Huns weren't just a single, monolithic force. They were a terrifyingly complex web of tribes, mercenaries, and opportunistic warriors, all bound together by a shared desire for plunder and a deep-seated hatred for the Roman Empire. Enter Aetius, the architect of Roman survival. A veteran general, a master tactician, a man who had stared down Attila's armies and emerged victorious more than once. He was the emperor's shadow, his protector, the one person standing between Valentinian and a complete collapse. But Aetius wasn't a simple bodyguard. He was a force unto himself, a brilliant strategist who understood the brutal calculus of warfare better than anyone else in the West. He'd spent years building fortifications, training troops, and forging alliances, a desperate, almost frantic attempt to hold back the tide of Hunnic aggression. And then, Attila died. It wasn't a glorious, heroic death in battle. It was a surprisingly mundane affair, a drunken fall from his horse, a broken neck, and a swift, messy end to a life of unparalleled brutality. But for the Roman Empire, it was a seismic event. Suddenly, the immediate threat was gone. The terrifying shadow that had loomed over the West for decades had vanished, but the silence was deceptive. The Hunnic Empire didn't simply disintegrate overnight. It fractured into a dozen warring factions, each vying for control of Attila's vast territories. And crucially, these factions were hungry. They hadn't been sated by a single victory. They needed more, they needed gold, they needed land, and that's when things started to unravel. The Eastern Roman Empire, flush with the recent victory over Attila, began to relax its defenses. They'd paid a colossal tribute, 10 times the previous amount, to keep the Huns at bay. Now, with the threat gone, they started to cut back, to reduce the payments, to test the limits of the new, fragmented Hunnic power, a disastrous miscalculation. Valemir, Attila's son-in-law, a cunning and ruthless warrior, saw his opportunity. He led a band of Goths, the Amal-led Goths, a particularly vicious and ambitious tribe, into the Balkans, raiding and pillaging with impunity. They weren't trying to conquer anything. They were simply looking for a quick profit, a chance to exploit the chaos and the weakened defenses of the Eastern Empire. Meanwhile, in Hungary, another Hunnic warlord, Hormizdak, was wreaking havoc in Dacia, pushing deep into Roman territory. These weren't coordinated campaigns of conquest. They were opportunistic raids, driven by greed and a desire for revenge. The Eastern Empire, weakened by internal divisions and preoccupied with its own problems, was utterly unprepared. They scrambled to raise armies to fortify their borders, but it was too late. the floodgates had opened, and then came the refugees. Thousands upon thousands of people, driven from their homes by the endless conflicts in Eastern Europe, poured into the Roman Empire. They weren't soldiers, they weren't conquerors. They were simply desperate people seeking a better life, a place to escape the carnage. But they brought with them a dangerous element, a lack of loyalty, a resentment towards the established order, and a willingness to fight for survival. The Roman army, already struggling to maintain its strength, was increasingly dominated by these new recruits: Siri, Herals, Alans, Torsilingi, a motley collection of mercenaries and displaced peoples. The situation in Italy became a powder keg. The Siri, a fierce nomadic tribe from the Carpathian Basin, were particularly disruptive. They formed their own independent kingdoms, challenging the authority of the Roman government. Odovacar, a Siri prince, seized the opportunity to launch a full-scale rebellion, demanding recognition as king of Italy. Valentinian, meanwhile, was trapped in a gilded cage, utterly detached from the realities of power. He was a figurehead, a puppet king manipulated by his mother's ghost and the ambitions of his advisors. He spent his days attending endless ceremonies, enduring humiliating displays of loyalty, and desperately trying to avoid any action that might upset the delicate balance of power. Aetius, frustrated by Valentinian's incompetence and increasingly alarmed by the growing instability, tried to assert his authority. He proposed a marriage alliance between Valentinian's daughter, Placidia, and Gaudentius, a young general who could secure his own position. It was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to stabilize the situation and ensure the succession of a competent ruler. But Valentinian, blinded by his own self-importance and unwilling to relinquish any control, refused. He saw Aetius as a threat, a rival for power. And as the situation deteriorated, the rift between them widened. The final act played out in 451 and 452. Attila, in a final, desperate attempt to assert his dominance, launched a massive invasion of Gaul. Aetius, recognizing the danger, rallied the Roman armies, forging a coalition with the Visigoths, a powerful Germanic tribe who had recently converted to Christianity. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains was a brutal, bloody stalemate. Aetius' tactics, combined with the Visigoths' ferocity, managed to hold back Attila's forces, but the victory was Pyrrhic. The Roman Empire was exhausted, depleted, and on the brink of collapse. And then Attila turned his attention to Italy. He sacked Rome, a horrific act of barbarity that sent shockwaves throughout the empire. The city was looted, burned, and desecrated, but even this didn't break the Roman spirit. The following year, Aetius led another campaign, this time into North Africa, where he decisively defeated the Vandals, a powerful Germanic tribe who controlled the western coast of the empire. But the victories were fleeting. The underlying problems remained. The Roman Empire was riddled with corruption, plagued by internal divisions, and increasingly vulnerable to external threats. As Attila died, the empire didn't breathe a sigh of relief. It didn't experience a renaissance. Instead, it stumbled, wounded and bleeding, into a new era of chaos and fragmentation. The Eastern Empire, weakened by its own internal struggles, continued to pay tribute to the successor kingdoms that had emerged from the wreckage of the Hunnic Empire. Valemir, the Hunnic warlord, became a king in the east, demanding ever-increasing payments. Meanwhile, in the west, the Roman army was increasingly dominated by refugees: Siri, Herals, Alans, Torsilingi, a testament to the empire's inability to assimilate new populations and its growing dependence on foreign mercenaries. The constant infighting between these successor kingdoms, the Ostrogoths, the Vandals, the Theodicei, created a volatile and unpredictable environment. Invasions, raids, and skirmishes became commonplace. The Western Roman Empire, already weakened by centuries of decline, finally succumbed to the pressure. In 476, Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain, deposed the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, and declared himself king of Italy. It wasn't a dramatic, heroic event. It was a quiet, almost anticlimactic end to an empire that had once dominated the world. But the fall of the Western Roman Empire wasn't just the result of barbarian invasions. It was the culmination of a long and slow process of decay, fueled by internal weakness, political corruption, and economic decline. And it was, in many ways, a direct consequence of Attila's legacy. The Hunnic Empire, a terrifying force of destruction, had inadvertently destabilized the Roman world, creating the conditions for its own collapse. And Valentinian. He remained a distant, irrelevant figure, a symbol of a bygone era. He died in 455, a forgotten king, his reign a footnote in the annals of history. So was the Roman Empire doomed the moment Attila's arrows stopped flying? Perhaps not. But Attila's actions undoubtedly accelerated its decline, exposing its weaknesses and unleashing forces that it could never control. And as for the teenage emperor, utterly detached from the realities of power, who inadvertently caused the downfall of a world. His story serves as a chilling reminder that even the most powerful empires can be undone by incompetence, arrogance, and a profound lack of understanding. Was it really the Huns, or was it something far more insidious?